The military is something that comes to mind. But what else? Story 1. I was a combat medic in the Army infantry during the war in Iraq. As much as you would think my experiences during deployments would have affected me, it was actually the time I was put into a rear detachment situation with my infantry battalion during a deployment that completely changed my entire view of the military. I'll just say that the base commander held a meeting with about 100 soldiers from all the different units on post in a classroom and asked, "Does anyone have any idea why so many soldiers on this post are killing themselves?" I knew exactly why. Without going into too much detail, it's because during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the military brought in kids who clearly should not have been in the military. They gave a lot of waivers for mental and emotional issues that had previously barred enlistment. And when those youngsters were sent off to war with the infantry, the only job they were able to get into, and inevitably got sent home because they couldn't handle the rigors of deployment, they were made to feel like total failures by the 23-year-old non-commissioned officers left behind in rear detachment. I saw a kid get bullied mercilessly for a week by some inconsiderate sergeant, and my buddy and I found him with a belt around his neck in his barracks bathroom. Luckily, being medics, we were able to save his life. But yes, that experience jaded me, even though I was in my 30s and probably should have already been jaded. Maybe it jaded me more. Story 2. Nursing. It's customer service with the added responsibility of having people's lives and well-being in your control. Throw in a healthy dose of unpleasant coworkers and being an extreme minority in the entire industry, and you've set the stage for trouble. Middle-aged male healthcare workers are the #1 for suicides in the United States. Go dudes! Story 3. I immediately thought about the arm of the law enforcement that hunts pedophiles, those pedophiles that are organized in networks that exploit and rape children and share pictures and videos of that online with each other. I cannot imagine what having to look at such material for extended periods of time must do to you and your view of the human race. In my mind, it must be one of the worst jobs in the world that are at the same time morally worth doing, and just that gap of opposite ends of ethics that you must hold in your head must wreak havoc on you. You cannot stand it, but you cannot stop. It is awful, but it is important. It makes me shudder. Story 4. Washing dishes in a restaurant. The head chef yells at you, the sous chef tells you to hurry up, and you work with other people who will bother you for no good reason. The waitstaff thinks you are unimportant. Bartenders think poorly of you and will yell at you, all for low pay. There are long hours into the night, unpleasant work conditions, and hot kitchens in the summer. You carry large bags of trash to the dumpster and unclog restaurant toilets because you are the lowest-ranking employee. You also clean up most of the kitchen at the end of the night. There is an extremely high turnover rate. Most people quit after less than a week. I made it 9 months before being moved up to a waiter. Story 5. Anything blue-collar where you work long hours, in deplorable conditions, work outside in the heat of summer or the cold of winter, and have to be on call for emergencies. Working in construction and maintenance for over a decade has made me tough both mentally and physically. It's not for everyone. Story 6. Not my current career, but retail liquor sales. For a time in my youth, I worked at a liquor store. Afternoon and evening work was expected, and I started to notice the regulars. Sometimes these same people would come in multiple times a shift for their poison. Disheartening, but there it is. When I started taking over occasional morning shifts for the manager, I began to notice the same regulars. Sometimes tapping on the door, waiting for it to open, coming back multiple times a day. One guy in particular, I estimate he was in and out 6 to 7 times a day for a half or pint of cheap vodka. Those realizations sent me out of that business. Although I understand that it's just a legal product on an open market, I couldn't look myself in the eye each day while providing someone with the seeds of their destruction. I saw the same thing when I had a chance to invest in a smoke shop. Even though I smoked at the time, I knew in my heart that it wasn't really a good thing. And providing people with the thing that will kill them is tough. I see the same thing in gambling establishments. The people working there are as dead inside as the patrons. Story 7. Merchant marines, specifically tugboats. Shared bathroom for 9 crew members. Odd working hours. Rough seas. Smells and it's so loud. And months away from home. Story 8. Underground coal mining. Worked for 10 years in the industry, and it can be totally brutal despite the pay. There were teams on straight graveyard shifts for years, but the worst was the 2-week swing shift where the crew would work 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. for 2 weeks, only Sunday off, and then switch to 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. for 2 weeks rotating. Not to mention mines are remote and usually require a 1-hour commute to civilization. Underground can be hard with lots of wetness, coldness, and poor air circulation. 80% of the diet comes from gas stations and Little Debbie snack cakes. Likewise, everyone chews tobacco and drinks 4 to 5 energy drinks through their shift. All this for making $120,000 or more a year, where the average home cost is $200,000. All this for endless toys such as boats and Ford Raptors. It's not even worth it because you don't have the time to enjoy it. Not to mention management at most of these places is extremely old school and can get political. There's some tough individuals, but guys in their late 20s look like they're 43 due to all the roughness in their lifestyle. I got dark eye circles and graying hair quite early from this life. It's not comparable to frontline combat or anything like that, but it's 60 to 70% similar intensity extended throughout a whole career. Camaraderie is unmatched. Your coworkers really do become your brothers and close friends. There are also no phones underground. You get this real man-to-man connection that's missing in the modern age. That's my favorite part about this life. And all the downsides make me still miss it due to the brotherhood. Story 9. Certified Nursing Assistant. Who wants to clean people in general, much less demented old people that can be rude or physically abusive? Now let's make it sweeter. Let's pay them just above minimum wage. People wouldn't want to do that job for $50 an hour, much less just over minimum. There's a reason why lots of certified nursing assistants are immigrants. They will put up with the challenges and work insane hours just to send some money home. This is, of course, coming from a jaded guy who's been a certified nursing assistant for over 5 years. Story 10. Our photographers see bodies every week, and they quickly become desensitized to people going through the worst days of their lives. In addition, the anchors and producers need to be able to set aside all emotion to remain unbiased. Furthermore, we begin to root for tragedy because tragedy equals work. Story 11. Lower-level management. Odds are you've worked your way up from a position doing actual work, so you now often have to take orders and implement directives from higher-level management who have never spent a day working at a basic job in the company. This means that they come up with idiotic ideas for stuff that just won't work because they have no experience, and you are responsible for why the brilliant plan isn't working or hasn't even been implemented. You also get to deal with a ton of complaints from the people under you, some of which may be legitimate, and manage the people who somehow got hired and are poor performers. Story 12. A lot of trades. Yes, there is an odd plumber making 6 figures, but it's a lot of guys making $25 an hour, getting up at 5 a.m. and destroying their bodies. Story 13. Anything in a hospital emergency room. Doctor, nurse, technician. You see enough kids die from overdoses and gunshot wounds. I do not care what your education level is. It burns you out, and you get numb to the world. Story 14. If you like cars, never become a mechanic. There are very few cars I can look at now and think, man, nice car. Now I look at it and go, huh, I wonder if a common problem is happening yet. What a piece of junk. Story 15. Journalism. My focus was crime and contacting police, reading police reports one after another. Some people say that there's too much violence in news articles and on television, but that's after we remove the worst of it and make it acceptable. Story 16. Anything hands-on like farming, construction, or mining, even kitchen work. Military, firefighting, and emergency medical technician come to mind. Professional athletes that train extremely hard, such as boxers, mixed martial arts fighters, and football players. Story 17. Being a firefighter, we never arrive when someone is having a good day. We see bad things happen to good people. We see bad things happen to innocent people. Sometimes we can make a save, sometimes we cannot. When we cannot, we have to forget it and wait for the next call. We have to turn off emotions, feelings, and just do our jobs. Story 18. Higher education. Actually, education in general. There are a lot of people who are educated beyond their intelligence and overly impressed with their own importance. I got my doctor of philosophy and went into civil service. Forget those individuals. Story 19. I'd say my military experience hardened me in some aspects, but also softened me up in a lot of others. I served as an infantry platoon leader in Iraq for 13 months between 2004 and 2005. I saw a decent amount of combat action, and I was directly involved in the recovery of dead and wounded. I experienced a lot of loss, and, as a result, I've developed debilitatingly severe post-traumatic stress disorder. I've also dealt with several suicide attempts and years of mental health issues. I'd say the whole experience hardened me in some aspects, but I'm much more emotional than I ever remember being. Movies make me cry all the time, and I'm not afraid to show my emotional side to my two daughters. I'd say I'm harder in that I know I can deal with anything, and I have absolute confidence in my abilities. Story 20. I worked the floor and poker rooms while putting myself through college. It's the depths of society. I watched for years as they brought in the elderly, took all their money, and sent them out. The same people every day, always complaining and wanting something for free, constantly trying to hustle anyone. People begged for money at the gas station because they didn't have any left for gas. Others were unable to control themselves at the poker table. Some even got upset when they won cars because the casino took too long to complete the paperwork. Employees were just as bad. Long-timers would follow the casinos to all the new locations. They hired locals who were unsavory characters as well. Most of my coworkers were older individuals working only for the benefits package. They hated life and everyone in it. I had to split tips with these people. The rest were people like me, working through school, or gamblers and drunks who were just working enough to keep drinking and gambling. It's nothing like what Hollywood shows you. It definitely kept my motivation high to use my degree and get out of there. I reject that entire subculture. Story 21. Doctor. Not necessarily jaded in all aspects of life, but definitely jaded towards sickness, disease, and death. You're around it so much, and taking care of patients really does become a customer service-like job. Television and movies would have you think we all run around having super passionate speeches about our altruism and how badly we need to treat and save people. No, it turns out we show up to our job, want to do our job well, but at the end of the day, it really just becomes a job you want to wrap up and head home from. Story 22. Not physically demanding or even having to deal with too many difficult people, but I did 2 years of mergers and acquisitions work at a law firm, and the hours and schedule are brutal. Most days I had no idea if I'd get off at 5 p.m. or 3 a.m. One day I worked 23 hours straight, just to get back to work 6 hours later. There's a reason some of those jobs pay first-year lawyers large amounts of money, and it's not because a first-year lawyer has a wealth of knowledge and experience. Story 23. I started working on a large tug and barge unit on the Great Lakes 2 weeks after I graduated high school. Before that, the only job I had was at Burger King. I went from a nice, soft, cushy teenager's life to working over 80 hours a week operating heavy machinery and doing hard manual labor, and being away from home for a month at a time. I learned a lot in a very short amount of time. Story 24. Being a salaried manager ruined my life. I felt a sense of obligation to always be available all the time, and the fact that the people above me took advantage of that. I would get a few hours of terrified sleep at a time because of texts coming in the middle of the night, waking up with horrible anxiety to see what texts I may have missed. It's been taking years for me to recover. Story 25. Police is the correct answer. Not only do you get to deal with the most foolish people, but you also get to deal with the most violent, often the same people. And even when you don't, you walk around with a target on you, knowing someone might randomly harm you, and you won't receive any special recognition. The story will just be mentioned casually and instantly forgotten. Story 26. Horseshoeing and farrier. You start out wanting to help horses, and over the years of seeing abused animals with nothing you can do to help them, you start to hate people and the cruelty they are capable of. The more abused horses you see, you start to realize that these people have children and are bosses and managers over other people, and then you meet some who think it's okay to treat you poorly. It's made me jaded, but I continue to look for the light in others and seek out love in all areas of life. Story 27. Social work. When you cannot help people because of how broken the system is. Every part of the process works against each other, And here you are bending rules, lying on paperwork, and coaching families on exactly what to say, just to make sure the minimal funding they are receiving does not get lowered or taken away simply because they made a few positive steps. And if you fail to do this, the families hate you. If you get caught, you risk losing your career and getting sued by the government. Story 28. I used to work as a foster child social worker. I was the person who managed the foster care caseload for the children after they had been removed from abusive and neglectful situations. I wasn't the one who performed the initial removal. Occasionally, I had to oversee supervised visitation with the children and their birth parents, because parents still have rights until they are adjudicated to have them terminated. Watching children light up at the prospect of actually getting to see their parents face to face, and then having to explain to them that they wouldn't be able to because their parents showed up to the visitation under the influence of alcohol or narcotics, was heartbreaking. Sitting next to children as their parents' defense attorney gets to cross-examine them with some of the most heinous and horrifying lines of questioning was stomach-churning. Documenting the scars and wounds inflicted upon them for evidence was infuriating. Reliving it day after day, week after week was toxic. I had to leave that job because I couldn't go a single day without crying.